So help us define terms. So legally and practically, what's the difference between charged fraud, proven fraud, suspected fraud, and improper payment, waste, abuse, an extrapolated loss estimate? So I just threw a lot of terms out there, and our listeners are probably having their minds
heads are
blown.
ready to explode,
Yes.
probably. Today, we are talking with Nat Smith, the DFL candidate for Minnesota Senate District 33, who is challenging Senator Karen Housley. Nat is an attorney who has spent his legal career combating fraud nationwide and representing whistleblowers, with a focus on protecting patient care. He also worked with Senator Ron Latz during the 2026 legislative session on proposed changes intended to strengthen whistleblower protections under Minnesota's False Claims Act.
We invited Nat to discuss how his legal experience informs stronger whistleblower protections and how that experience would shape his work as a state senator. We'll briefly put Minnesota's fraud record in context, then talk about why Nat is running, what he is hearing from District 33 voters, and his priorities on affordability, infrastructure, PFAS in drinking water, and health care for seniors.
Nat, welcome to the Politics Chicks podcast. We're so glad to have you today.
Hey, good morning. Thank you guys for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
We're glad to have you.
Glad to have you.
Before we jump in on things, I want to preface things for our listeners that we're going to delve into some terms that might make people's eyes roll back in their heads, but fraud is truly an important issue that affects everybody. So this is something that everybody should be paying attention to. So I'm going to back up and focus on you for a second. You grew up as the son of doctors and practiced geriatric and pediatric medicine. That's a wide range of things. Yeah. Your campaign biography says that that is where you first saw both barriers to care and the fraud, waste, and abuse that can exist in healthcare. What did you see early in that ultimately led you to become a fraud attorney?
So growing up, I had parents, my mom in pediatrics, and she certainly saw some of the challenges that young families and single mothers had in terms of their ability to access care. But really what got me into this line of work that I do today, combating fraud, was my dad's experience as a geriatric physician. So he was someone that specialized in Alzheimer's and dementia and actually worked the St. Croix River Valley for most of his legal career, working in nursing homes and assisted living facilities and the like across the valley. And he saw firsthand some of the fraud, waste, and abuse facing particularly our seniors in terms of Medicare and Medicaid concerns there. And it was that experience that really inspired me to get into the line of work that I do today, combating fraud. Hospice fraud and just in general, the system is designed in such that our seniors are most vulnerable to some of these fraud, waste, and abuse that we see across the country.
Well, and for listeners who may not understand this area of law, what does your work actually look like? And whom are you representing when you fight fraud or represent a whistleblower?
Yeah, so this area of work is very unique compared to a lot of other legal work that folks might be familiar with. So this is really a public-private partnership between whistleblowers and the government working together to combat fraud. And maybe I'll back up just a little bit because your listeners might be interested to know a little bit about the history of the statute that I primarily work under, which is called the False Claims Act.
Yeah.
And there are many states that have a state equivalent of that, including Minnesota. It has its own Minnesota False Claims Act. The False Claims Act was actually enacted back in 1863 by Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War because of rampant fraud on the Union Army. So we're talking what I think are very interesting things, sawdust instead of gunpowder, lame mules instead of horses, cardboard shoes instead of leather. Those were the types of fraud schemes we were seeing back in 1863. And today, the fraud schemes have changed. The types of fraud that we see are very different than maybe some of that, what we were seeing back then. It's a lot of healthcare fraud, defense contracting fraud, customs fraud, small business association. There's a large swath that the government touches on. And so I work with individuals who are kind of boots on the ground seeing this fraud firsthand. So it's oftentimes employees that are working for a particular entity, and they learn that that entity has been engaged in some sort of fraudulent conduct. And oftentimes they report it internally and take a stand against it, and oftentimes are faced with retaliation after bringing that conduct to light. And so we work with these individuals to bring that fraud to light and to report it to the government. And then we'll work in conjunction with the government, and this is the public-private partnership envisioned by the statute to help investigate that fraud and hold fraudsters accountable so that we can recover our taxpayer dollars from those wrongdoers.
Okay. What are you hearing from voters? You know, since you are both an expert in fraud, but you're also running for office, what are you hearing when you're on the campaign trail?
I definitely hear a lot about fraud. But that might be somewhat unique to me as a candidate because I'm one of, as far as I'm aware, the only candidate or elected official within the legislature that has actual experience combating fraud. And so I lean into it and really want to bring it to light because I think it's a really important issue. But I think voters are concerned not only about the fraud, but just transparency in general with how our taxpayer dollars are being used. And so I think something that I would want to do as a senator is work to help increase that transparency so that we know where our dollars are going and we know that it's going to the programs that we intend it to. But I think people are genuinely concerned about the fraud here in Minnesota and want to know that someone's working to take action against it. And I'm excited to talk with you all about some of the work that I've already done just as a Joe Schmo citizen working to help make improvements and deliver results for Minnesotans.
Well, you're not the only candidate who has said that to us because we just interviewed Darcy Smith, who's running for the Minnesota State House, and she'll actually be my representative in the Minnesota State House. So she's from my district. And the first thing that when we asked her that question, the first thing that she said also was fraud when she was door knocking. That is a concern that voters are expressing to her. And just so our listeners know, Monica, our investigative editor, Renee Herskovitz, and I actually wrote a pretty extensive reporting piece on the Minnesota fraud that is happening in the state, going all the way back to how it started as early as 2016, 2017. So that is what I'm going to be referencing right now. And I will include a link to that article in the show notes. But we've shared it with quite a few people running for office in Minnesota, and they found it helpful. So let's talk about, let's just touch on that for a minute. Our reporting begins with a sentence that we want to be unmistakable about. The fraud was real, right? We all know that it happened. And Minnesota was too slow to stop parts of it. And elected leaders should be held accountable for oversight failures. But public discussion often combines separate programs, charged cases, improper payments. What we found was that they kind of convoluted this into like a single narrative without applying the context and nuance that was necessary to truly understand exactly what happened here. And what that resulted in was like an enormous number that A, was not properly vetted and is not backed by data, and B, sounds great as a talking point because what is it, like $90 billion? Or it's like I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it is an enormous number. So as a fraud attorney, what belongs in the same analytical bucket, and what do you think we need to keep separate?
Yeah, I think speculative or divisive statements around the issue don't work to help deliver results. And instead, like you referenced, they sow a lot of confusion and just anger as to what's going on. And people should be angry. I mean, when fraud occurs,
absolutely,
we need to address it and we need to take it seriously because it is a real issue. But I think we need to be, when it comes to this topic in particular, we really need to be focused on facts and evidence, because that's what leads to accountability and that's what leads to results. When we're just talking at high level speculative numbers, it's hard to advance anything because we don't know what's actually going on. And that's where I would focus my effort, is on the facts and on the evidence, and then working to hold people accountable.
One of the things that we have focused on in our reporting and our discussions with other candidates is the fact that while the fraud is certainly real in Minnesota, it has been an inordinate target of the administration, because fraud is happening in every state in the country, and the rates in Minnesota are actually much lower than they are in other states. But it is something the voters are looking at. It's something that we're talking about. So help us define terms. So legally and practically, what's the difference between charged fraud, proven fraud, suspected fraud, and improper payment, waste, abuse, an extrapolated loss estimate? So I just threw a lot of terms out there, and our listeners are probably having their minds
heads are
blown.
ready to explode,
Yes.
probably.
So put some things in perspective for us.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just focus on three of those. So suspected fraud is something where somebody alerts maybe the government that there's something going on here that warrants an investigation. It warrants the government's time to take a look at a particular issue, a situation, and peel back the layers of the onion, if you will, and see what's going on. Is it actual knowing fraud, or was it a mistake? Because mistakes do happen. Humans are not perfect, and you're working in really complicated systems often, particularly in healthcare. And a lot of providers are just trying to do their best to navigate that system. So there's certainly opportunity for mistake, and then you can correct that action. And that's where I think that suspected fraud is a really important opportunity for the government to take a look at something so that it can be properly addressed in whatever that context is. Charged fraud means that there has been sufficient evidence after that investigation has gone on that there is some evidence of knowing fraud, as opposed to mere negligence or mistake that someone may have made. And then the government's going to charge them with that improper, illegal conduct. And proven fraud, I think, is a situation where someone has gone to trial and there's been a verdict, the evidence has been presented and there's been a jury verdict, or maybe a plea has been entered where someone has admitted to that, engaging in that conduct, and then they're going to be held accountable for that. And I think that's kind of part of this natural process when it comes to looking at fraud. Somebody has to raise concerns so that it can be investigated. The evidence has to be gathered so that people can be charged, and then that evidence has to be presented to a jury, because that's how our judicial system works. You're innocent until proven guilty. And I think that's a real strength here in our judicial system. But that process does take time, which can be frustrating. But the sooner that we can bring improper conduct to light, the sooner it can be addressed. And that's where I think whistleblowers are a really important part of that puzzle, because they're on the front line seeing the conduct firsthand.
Yeah, and we could do an entire episode on fraud, right? So probably a 2-hour, 3-hour episode to talk. I mean, this story is enormous, but to like put this in a nutshell, the doors to fraud were left open in these specific programs. So the housing stabilization, the EIDBI, which provides autism services for kids. That was deliberately, those stopgaps were deliberately left out of legislation that was passed by Minnesota Republicans in 2017. And they even went so far as to say that providing the type of supplemental documentation that would make fraud less likely would be an undue burden on providers. So there is plenty of blame to go around, and fortunately in 2025 the legislature did enact some stopgaps that were originally written into bills as far back as 2017, but were not passed by either they died in committee or they did not make it out of the House or the Senate. So But that context is important because what's happened is a narrative has been woven, at least in Minnesota, and we consider this a national story because this predicated Operation Metro Surge in Minnesota. It was one of the reasons that they gave for coming to Minnesota and descending upon our state with lawless people, and 2 Minnesotans dying. You were quoted in an article that the Star Tribune wrote and dropped on the same day that we dropped our article, and Christy Janigo, who we also have interviewed, was quoted in that article as well. And I think there's definitely merit to that reporting. But in our response to the Star Tribune, we argued that political pressure was real, but the underlying record needed more context because what they left out, and now this lack of context is now solidifying into the accepted narrative. So, did the story that they presented and that you saw accurately represent your position, and what facts or distinctions do voters still need to have in order to hold government accountable without overstating what the evidence proves? Because I felt like the questions that they asked you were kind of leading, and that they had a certain narrative that they were trying to lay out in the way that they asked you those questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing I have heard a lot at the doors and from voters is some exhaustion with the blame game and Republicans and Democrats pointing their fingers at each other, but then nothing gets done. There's no results that come from that. And I wasn't in office during any of these discussions that were going on, but I am somebody that's ready to roll my sleeves up and get to work to do something about it. And that's where I think my focus is going to be is what can we do to work to help improve the systems so that we can work to prevent fraud, and then what can we do to help redress fraud when it does occur and make sure that we're holding folks accountable. I think a couple of things that are notable just for the context. Fraud is not unique to Minnesota. It happens all across the country. States like California, Florida, Texas, New Jersey are some of the other states that have a lot of fraud going on. It's not a red or a blue issue. It's something that happens all across the country. And actually, the Government Accountability Office recently released a report looking at 2018 to 2022. And just to note, so at the federal level, there is something estimated between 200 billion and 500 billion in fraud every single year at the federal level. And I went back and looked at some even earlier reportings from publication journals like JAMA with some earlier estimates, at least $100 billion a year. So we're talking about a long-standing issue. I mean, as I said, the False Claims Act was enacted in 1863. And so we've been dealing with fraud in this country for a really long time. And in some ways, it is the way our systems are designed in terms of loopholes that bad actors are able to exploit. And that's what I've been spending my time looking into, and am ready to show up to help close some of those loopholes. But I think at the end of the day, fraud is something that transcends the political divide, should transcend Democrat and Republican, and should be something that we should be able to get bipartisan support to work to address. And understanding that while fraud is not unique to Minnesota, I do think the response of Minnesotans was unique. I mean, people showed up for their neighbors. People helped out with providing food to their neighbors, rent support, and really to take a stand against federal overreach here in our state. And I think that is a tremendous accolade to the people of Minnesota, because it shows who we really are. We are people that are going to stand up for our neighbors and be there for each other. And I find that really encouraging.
We have often talked about how Minnesota has been a bright light in this last year and a half, and the neighboring and the neighborism that we have seen. And our legislature is really important in helping with that. And you are running for Minnesota Senate. You live in Stillwater. You serve on the Washington County Community Development Block Grant Advisory Committee and the Stillwater Human Rights Commission. That's a lot to say right there.
Yeah.
Why did you decide that this was the moment to run for Minnesota Senate?
I'm just an ordinary Minnesotan, not a career politician. I was just somebody that was tired of sitting on the sidelines, seeing the political gridlock, tired of the status quo, and just promised change that just never seemed to come. My wife and I found out that we were pregnant last summer, so we now have a 3-month-old.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
We are very much in the trenches.
Yeah, you are.
But it really solidified, my desire to run, because I wanted to be somebody not only to protect my daughter's future, but create a brighter future for all Minnesotans, and somebody that was going to be an independent voice that would work to put people over politics and actually work to deliver results. Because I feel like for far too long, we've just seen political gridlock not moving the needle, and too much unnecessary divisiveness and arguing amongst parties, and not representing the people of Minnesota and actually showing up to do the job that we're sent to office to do, which is to represent our constituents and represent Minnesotans, and work to make lives better for everyday Minnesotans. And so I decided to not sit on the sidelines any longer, and to bring my experience combating fraud to bear for Minnesotans, and to work to create a brighter future.
We are seeing that more and more with candidates that we're talking to, people that had no intention of getting into politics and were driven to do it by what they saw around them. And we have said that it's the people like you that have a life before politics that make the best leaders, because you know what real life is. So thank you for getting into the race, because I know that's a big step to make that move to be a candidate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It really is. Thank you.
Yeah. And the other thing I think people appreciate when they're looking at a candidate is experience, right? And you are coming from a very, very unique experience pool, because during the 2026 session, you worked on your own time with Senator Ron Latz on proposed amendments intended to strengthen the whistleblower protections under Minnesota's False Claims Act. So you've actually gone through the process of actually helping to write legislation, which I find both admirable and a benefit for someone who's running, because now it's not like you're not going to be learning on the job, or Monica and I often say building the plane while you're flying it. Like, you've got this foundation to jump off of, right? So what problems were those amendments designed to solve that you worked on with Senator Latz? And what would they change for a person who sees fraud from the inside?
Yeah. So this was a really fun endeavor, very unique. I've never done anything
Okay,
like
I'm going
this.
to interject there and say that you might be very unique in saying
Yeah.
that writing
I know,
legislation and
right?
delving into that is fun.
And it's what I do for a living, is deep dives into statutes and regulations, and really trying to understand what the policy was intended to do, and maybe where it falls short. And so I saw an opportunity with the Minnesota False Claims Act to make improvements that can help us combat fraud. And to quote Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican of Iowa, who's been a champion of whistleblowers over the years, whistleblowers are the government's most powerful tool to combat fraud. And so I wanted to help improve protections for whistleblowers, so that those individuals on the front lines seeing fraud firsthand can feel empowered and protected to stand up against fraud and feel safe in doing so and reporting that fraud, so we can address it timely. It also prevents fraudsters from working to silence people who want to take a stand against fraud, so that they can actually bring that conduct to light. And it strengthens the government's, particularly here in Minnesota, the Attorney General's office, to help bring cases, working in conjunction with city and county attorneys. And it also expands the types of fraud that we can combat here in Minnesota in particular expanding the scope of the statute to encompass certain tax fraud, and clarifying that it would also apply to unemployment insurance fraud schemes as well.
What's the first step for a whistleblower? Like, let's say that I work in a nursing home or in healthcare somewhere, and I suspect that something is happening. Where do I go first?
Yeah. A lot of times people will try to address it internally. And I think that is a good first step, because if you can flag an issue and that company is willing to make a change and address it, that's terrific. And that's what we want, is for people to recognize that something is not right and make the correction. But when that doesn't happen, the best next step is probably to reach out to someone like me, who actually works in this space representing whistleblowers to help them combat fraud. But you can also reach out directly to the Attorney General's office here in Minnesota, or if you're in any other part of the country, reaching out to the Attorney General's office, or even within the agency program that's at issue. Those are all options as well. But getting counsel and getting some advice on how to take those next steps, I think is the best advice I would give to someone who's facing those challenges, so that they can get the necessary support and guidance on how to help best address whatever that conduct is that they're observing.
Cool. Well, let's just put a quick fine point on why people would need counsel and why whistleblowers do require protection, because people may not understand, why would a whistleblower need to go to an attorney before they went to their place of employment? So let's have you explain that for a second.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times people seeing this stuff are employees. They might be a nurse practitioner, they might be a physician, they might be a sales rep for a pharmaceutical company. And they unearth through their day-to-day experiences that something is not right. And oftentimes when they report internally, when it's knowing fraud and it's systemic across a corporation, there's not a desire to change that conduct. But there is a desire to get rid of the person who's raising concerns. And so they are often terminated shortly after raising concerns. And so that's where a lot of folks come out of that situation, is they raised concerns internally. They face some sort of adverse action, likely termination, and then they're looking for guidance on how to take those next steps. And we're able to work with whistleblowers in that situation to help provide them either additional guidance with respect to their employment situation, or taking a hard look at this fraud schemes that they were bringing to light. Most every whistleblower that I've ever talked to has a desire to do the right thing. And it takes a lot of courage for people to take a stand, particularly against, like a national company that's providing healthcare services all across the country, and to risk their careers and their livelihoods to take a stand against something that they see that is wrong. And they just want to see people get the best care possible, make sure that there's not fraud and waste going on in our healthcare system, and they want to take a stand to do what's right. And I just really enjoy the work for that reason, because I'm working with really great individuals.
So how would Minnesotans know if things are working, both from a whistleblower standpoint, from a legislation standpoint? When do we say, yep, we are addressing this problem?
I think with respect to the amendments that I've introduced to the Minnesota False Claims Act and working to strengthen our ability to combat fraud here in the state, is I think we will see more reporting of fraud when it occurs, and earlier reporting of fraud, so that it doesn't go undetected for a long period of time. And I think that's also going to lead to larger recoveries, because we're able to combat it a lot sooner. And so we're going to see a much larger recovery of our taxpayer dollars before that money is either spent somewhere or moved around, or whatever shell games corporations might play with respect to assets and liabilities. And so those are a couple of things I would be looking for: more reporting, faster reporting, and larger recoveries from the fraudsters, recovering our taxpayer dollars.
Well, let's circle back now to talk about a bit more about your campaign, because you're not just running on fraud, right? And the experience that you have writing fraud legislation. You have other concerns that you've brought to your campaign. One of them is affordability, right? So, what is the biggest affordability pressure facing families in District 33 right now? And just, you know, the district that you live in, because you're in Stillwater, there's like a hospitality industry there, because there are a lot of restaurants, there are hotels, it's got a little Main Street shopping area. So it may be different than it is different than, say, a rural area just outside of, Rochester. So what is the biggest affordability pressure facing families in District 33 right now? And what can a state senator realistically do? What measures can you prioritize first? And how would you pay for them without simply shifting the burden elsewhere?
Yeah. One thing I love about our district here is it not only has such a unique downtown experience like historic Stillwater.
Love it there.
We also have family farms up in Scandia and Hugo and parts of Grant. And so we are this really unique blend of urban and rural communities. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing. It's so wonderful to drive up north into north part of Washington County, and you're just in a much more agriculturally focused area. And downtown here in Stillwater, you've got that hospitality industry, and those needs are different for those types of communities. And something that I'm hearing a lot about in talking with voters at the door is property taxes.
Yes.
And housing.
Yeah.
Those are a couple big issues that we're hearing. And then additionally, just those other kitchen table issues, the cost of groceries, the cost of gas. Most people are just trying to live their day-to-day lives, take care of themselves and their families. And they are really struggling to just have their basic needs met. And so those are a couple of areas that I would want to focus in on, working to ways to provide some tax relief for middle class and lower class, and working to address healthcare costs as well, and housing. So with respect to housing, I think there's opportunities for us to look at ways we can make zoning changes so that there's more available housing in general. And also looking at ways that we can shore up, and this applies both for healthcare and for housing, working at ways that we can shore up and provide more guardrails around special interests, private interests, hedge funds coming in and buying up large swaths of the industry. So buying up large swaths of housing and then increasing the rents or increasing the property
Right.
there, which makes it unattainable for many people. And in the healthcare space, particularly with our senior living communities, see a lot of private interests and hedge funds coming in, buying up those practices, and then shortly thereafter cutting staff, raising rents, and looking at opportunities to close some of those loopholes, because a lot of that is just putting profits over people, and I think it should be people over profits.
I can't tell you I can't count on all my fingers and toes how many times we've heard candidates say that one of the biggest concerns that they have is that people are just trying to live their lives, right? They want to be able to afford a decent place to live. They want to be able to not worry about putting food on the table. They want to not worry that they can't afford to put gas in their car or pay their electrical bill. So I think that's bipartisan. And people,
I hope so.
yes,
Right.
yes. And this should be something that we all agree on and not quibble over. So,
Yeah. And that's where I think it's important for us to be looking for those opportunities where there is alignment. Even when I have some conversations with people who are maybe we're not always aligned on everything, I think there's far often more that we are aligned on than the one or two issues that we're told are going to dictate everything that we have to do. And that's where a lot of my focus has been on the doors, is finding that common ground, finding those opportunities where we can work together. And that's the type of person that I am, and the type of work ethic that I'm going to bring to the Senate, is working to provide results. And that's going to mean working across the aisle in a bipartisan manner.
You know, we hear that more and more from candidates that we talk to, that when they're out on the campaign trail, when they're knocking on doors, what they hear from their voters is universal. It's those kitchen table issues that everyone is concerned about, you know, childcare, healthcare, cost of groceries, housing. And I think it's good for all of us to remember that there is more that unites us than divides us. And Lord help us get to a point where the whole government recognizes that. So thank you again for running. And we had a lot of serious issues to talk about, but let's talk about some fun things now. Okay, so the St. Croix is a beautiful place. Stillwater sunrise or St. Croix sunset?
I am an early bird, so I got to go Stillwater sunrise.
Running trail or bike trail?
Fortunately, we've got some really great trails out here that are multi-purpose use, but I've been doing a lot of training for marathons over the last couple of years, so I'm going to say running trail.
Have you done the Twin Cities Marathon?
I have. I've trained for it twice, and it's a beautiful race. And
I ran it 3 times. Monica, did you know
I've done
that
it 4
Monica
times.
Yeah. Did you know that Monica and I met originally training for a marathon?
I did not know that.
Yeah. We trained for Chicago together.
It is,
And I would say that the Twin Cities Marathon, I've done a number of marathons across the country, and Twin Cities
Same.
is my favorite.
It is by far my favorite. That last little hitch up summit kicks you in the butt, but it is just, it's so beautiful.
When you round that corner and see the cathedral, and then you got the Capitol, nothing
And
like
you can't
it.
put your brakes on because it's a straight downhill. And you're like hoping you run into something at the end because you just can't stop at that point, right? So, what is one Minnesota place every visitor should see if they come here to visit?
for me, it's got to be the Boundary Waters. It's a bit of a hike if you're flying into the Twin Cities to get up there, but the North Shore and the Boundary Waters are just a beautiful, beautiful place. I started going up there when I was 8 years old and taking family trips, during the summertime. My wife and I did kind of our mini moon, if you will, up there after we were married, because it's just a beautiful place, and it's one of the few places that you can really truly disconnect and really connect with nature. And it's just
Absolutely.
a beautiful part of the country and a beautiful part of our state.
Yes.
And we ask this of everyone. What's giving you hope right now? Because we need it.
The thing that's giving me the most hope has got to be just how engaged people are right now. I attended my first caucus and convention this year because this whole new political experience is new to me and navigating that. And looking back at some of the historic numbers, and I think maybe 2024, there was maybe 120 some people. And this year, it was almost 400 people that were in attendance. A lot of first-time people, a lot of young people. And so we're just seeing, I just referenced that as an example, but people, I think, are just finding whatever their way is to get more involved in the political process. And just seeing a lot more engagement and a lot more engagement from our youth is just really, really encouraging and gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we didn't get to everything we wanted to talk to you about today. We never do. Monica and I always start out with the best intentions, and of course, time becomes constrained. But you do have other platforms that you're running on right now, such as infrastructure and PFAS and drinking water, and those are two things that you're very passionate about. So we'd like to give our listeners an opportunity to go and read more about that. So where can they find out more about your campaign, read your positions, and get involved?
Yeah, so the best way to do that would be to visit our website, natsmith4mn.com. Or you can also check us out on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram predominantly, and that's the best way to check us out. There's opportunities to get involved in the campaign, door knocking, hosting a yard sign, things like that via Mobilize, which you'll find on our website. And I'm always happy to talk with folks. The number on the website comes right to me. So feel free to reach out if you check it out and want to talk to me more about any particular issues. I'm always happy to continue those discussions.
You know, all the cool kids are on Threads.
Well, we are anyway. I don't know what that means for.
Yeah. So, well,
before we close
Threads.
out, is there anything else that we didn't ask that your listeners should know?
Yeah, I think the last couple of things I would maybe mention. I've always worked for small businesses. I grew up working for my stepdad's small business. I was an interior exterior painter and did all that work by hand starting when I was 13. Did that through college, and that really grounded my work ethic. Taught me integrity, taught me discipline, taught me the value of a hard day's work and how hard Minnesotans work to provide for their families. And I think my legal work has really given me the skill set we need in the Senate, understanding complex policies, that's statutes and regulations, creative problem solving, and then working with people with competing interests to bring them together to, at the end of the day, get something done and deliver results. And that's what I want to do. That's why I'm running, because I want to be somebody that's going to be a voice for the people, put people over politics, and work to deliver results for Minnesotans. And that's my commitment, to show up, to listen, and to deliver.
I love that. I love that. Well, Nat, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you explaining how your legal experience shapes whistleblower protections and sharing what you would do about affordability. And I'm sure our readers are going to be very interested in seeing your viewpoints on infrastructure and drinking water safety and seniors' health care. We'd like to probably have you back for at least another short segment so we could have you talk about that and have the opportunity to expound a little bit more on your campaign. So we'll reach out to your team and hopefully we can get you back for another short spot. And
Would love to do that.
That'd be great.
Yeah, thank you guys again for having me today. It was great to talk about my background and experience combating fraud and some of the other issues that are top of mind for me and for voters. And thank you all again.
Great to have you with us. And with that 3-month-old, I hope you and your wife are getting a little sleep at that house.
Every night is a little bit of a different challenge, but we're really lucky. We're very lucky.
The first one's always the challenge, right, Monica? Would you say? I think you become less stressed with.
No, not for me. I mean,
really?
My world came about because our oldest was adopted, and 6 weeks after we adopted her, we found out we were pregnant. So we went from 0 to 2 kids in 9 months. So no, number 2 was way more stressful.
Yikes.
Well, Nat, good luck with the campaign and good luck with sleeping.
Thank you both. I really appreciate it. Great to talk with you.
To our listeners, if you are finding meaning in the stories we're sharing, if something moves you, challenges you, makes you see the world a little differently, please like, comment, and share. It helps more than you know.
And follow us everywhere at The Politics Chicks on Substack, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.
Thanks for being a part of our community. Keep shining your light so we can find each other in the dark.
And remember, we're stronger together. Nat, this was a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk to us today.
Thanks, Nat.
Thank you all.